Across the vast expanse of time, mythologies have forged the world. From the depths of chaos to the flames of distant realms, every culture has woven tales of gods, heroes, and celestial wonders. Welcome to Myth, your mythological portal. Subscribe for more epic journeys. Visit myth and discover all our products. After the gods divided the cosmos and returned to their realms, a profound stillness settled over creation. The skies wheeled, the seas churned, and the underworld echoed with new laws, yet no voices rose to praise or curse. Gaia, the ancient earth, felt the emptiness like an ache. "Who will remember?" she whispered through her roots. Without mortals to witness, divine deeds would fade like footprints in sand. Zeus, newly crowned Lord of Heaven and Earth, heard the earth's lament and felt his own unease. He had bound the Titans, cast lots with his brothers, and carved out dominions, but he sensed that sovereignty meant little if unobserved. He stood upon a bank of cloud, gazing down at the barren world, and decided to fill the silence with mortal voices. He called upon Prometheus, the crafty Titan, whose foresight had served both gods and men. "Shape a race to honor us," Zeus commanded. Prometheus agreed, knowing the venture would invite both gratitude and wrath. This is the story of how humans were made, how fire was stolen, and how a jar opened to unleash sorrows and hope. It is the price of creation and the beginning of mortal history. In those days before the coming of Pandora, the world of men was unlike any that followed. There were no mothers, no daughters or sisters. Men sprung up from the soil itself, children of the fertile earth. They lived without toil, ignorant of labor and sorrow in a kind of golden age that would soon vanish forever. Gaia, the primordial earth, seethed beneath the gods' new order. Mountains stood, rivers flowed, stars traced their courses, but no living creature raised a hymn or offered sacrifice. From fissures and caves, Gaia murmured, "I feel empty. My stones echo only wind." Her complaint traveled through roots and rocks until it reached Olympus. Zeus leaned over his palace balcony and listened. He had distributed lots with Poseidon and Hades, taken the heavens and earth for himself, and seen his siblings freed, yet he realized the world lacked witnesses. Without voices to recount victories and tragedies, even gods could become myths. He summoned Prometheus, son of Iapetus and Themis, a titan whose name meant forethought. Prometheus approached cautiously, aware that his council at Mekone had provoked Zeus's anger before. Zeus spoke plainly, "I want beings who will honor us and remember, make them able to feel, to learn, to pray." Prometheus looked at the vast, lifeless earth and nodded. He felt pity for the silence and curiosity about what such creatures would become. In his heart, compassion and rebellion stirred. The commission marked the first step toward humanity. Prometheus descended to the banks of the wide river Oceanus, where rich silt and clear water met. Kneeling, he scooped handfuls of clay and mixed them with water until they were malleable. He shaped figures with fingers adept from ages of crafting. Their bodies were upright, their limbs proportionate, and their faces reflected divine symmetry. He fashioned eyes capable of seeing sky and star, mouths capable of speech, and hands built for work. He formed ears sensitive to music and hearts receptive to wonder. Unlike beasts that crawled on four legs, he designed these beings to stand tall so they could gaze at the heavens. As he worked, he pondered his mother Themis's teachings about justice and his own wish to defy tyranny. The empty earth around him became a workshop strewn with statues. He arranged them in rows along the riverbank. The clay figures lay inert, awaiting animation. Prometheus wiped mud from his brow and whispered, "I will give them everything I can, wisdom, fire, and perhaps hope." He knew he was crafting not just bodies, but the future. The still forms would soon become humankind. When the clay figures were ready, owl-eyed Athena descended from Olympus. She carried no spear, no shield. Her gift this day was gentler. She bent over each form and breathed a spark of divine essence into its lips. Warmth suffused the clay. Fingers twitched, chests rose, eyes fluttered open and reflected the sky. The beings blinked and inhaled for the first time. They looked around, blinking at sunlight and shadow. They could not yet speak, but their expressions revealed awe. Prometheus stood nearby, watching with pride and trembling. He saw them wobble as they attempted to stand. Athena guided them, ensuring their legs could support their weight. She smiled slightly when they took their first steps. Then she withdrew to her realm, leaving life to blossom. Prometheus realized the enormity of what he had started. These creatures would feel hunger and fear. They would love, rage, and invent. He resolved to protect them even if it meant angering Zeus. Athena's breath turned statues into souls, bridging divine and mortal. The earth exhaled with them as if sharing their first. As the sun slid behind mountains, the new beings experienced their first night. Darkness poured over the land, and cold seeped into their clay bones. They huddled together under branches and leaves, bodies trembling. They had neither fire nor clothing. They felt hunger gnaw and fear prick their skin. Wolves howled in the distance, and unseen things rustled in the brush. They whispered wordless sounds and clutched each other. Prometheus watched from a nearby hillside, unseen. Compassion twisted inside him. He remembered how Zeus had punished his kind and suspected Zeus might withhold aid now. He thought of his previous trick with the ox at Mekone, how he had divided the carcass to favor men, and how Zeus had responded by taking away fire. He realized that if mortals were to survive, they needed heat. He gritted his teeth. "I cannot let them freeze," he murmured. Fear of divine wrath battled with pity for the shivering figures. His resolve hardened. He would act. The first night revealed that humans were fragile, and their weakness was a catalyst for Prometheus's next defiant step. Before fire was given, there was a feast at Mekone where gods and mortals gathered to decide the terms of sacrifice. Prometheus slaughtered an ox and divided it into 2 heaps. In one pile, he placed the choice meat covered with unsightly stomach. In the other, he arranged white bones hidden under rich fat. He invited Zeus to choose which offering the gods would receive. The king of the gods saw through the deception, but selected the bones, establishing forever that gods would receive fat and bones, while mortals kept the meat. Mortals rejoiced. They would eat well. Zeus, however, seethed. He felt mocked in front of humans and immortals. His eyes burned like lightning. He resolved to punish the Titan and the race he favored. The event at Mekone set 2 consequences in motion. Men would keep the flesh of sacrifices, and Zeus would withdraw fire from earth as retaliation. Prometheus's cunning secured the best portion for humans, but seeded divine anger. The sacrifice at Mekone becomes a pivotal moment in the myth, explaining why burnt bones are offered on altars and why Zeus's next act would be so severe. Humiliated and enraged by the trick at Mekone, Zeus devised a punishment that would wound both Prometheus and his new creations. He summoned Hephaestus and commanded that the sacred flame be removed from the mortal world. The divine smith obeyed. The hearths of men went cold. Flames flickered, dwindled, and died. Smoke no longer rose with prayers. Darkness enveloped huts and caves. Meat returned to being raw and tough. People shivered and wrapped their arms around themselves. Their eyes reflected starlight, but not warmth. Zeus watched their suffering from Olympus and felt his anger momentarily appeased. Without fire, mortals' short lives would be harsh. They would know who held ultimate power. Prometheus paced the hills, fists clenched. He saw frost forming on leaves and tears freezing on cheeks. With each shiver, his determination grew. He decided to risk everything to return the stolen gift. In that moment, compassion outweighed caution. The withholding of fire created an absence that defined humanity's early days and spurred Prometheus to act against the will of his king. Prometheus retreated to a secluded cave to devise his next move. He felt the weight of his actions at Mekone and the suffering outside. He considered approaching Zeus directly, but the king's pride was too inflamed. He could not stand idly by while his creations perished. He recalled his youth when he had supported Zeus in overthrowing Cronus. He thought of how he had counseled caution to his fellow Titans and how his foresight had been ignored. He remembered the prophecy that one day a son of Zeus would depose him, a secret his mother, Themis, goddess of divine law and prophecy, had whispered to him when he was young. Themis had taught him that fate was inexorable and that knowledge of its workings was power. He wondered whether his defiance might indirectly bring that future. In a moment of clarity, he resolved to steal fire rather than petition for it. He would slip into the gods' domain and take what they denied. "Let Zeus chain me if he must," he whispered, "but I will not let these beings die without light." His plan required cunning and daring. He would need a vessel to carry the flame and a path up Olympus that avoided Hera's watchful eyes. He inhaled deeply, gathering courage. His resolve sealed his fate. He would be a rebel, a benefactor, and ultimately a martyr. One moonless night, Prometheus began his audacious theft. He crept up the slopes of Olympus, the air thin and cold. The palaces of the gods glittered faintly, guarded by golden dogs and serpents. He moved silently past Hera's threshold, past Aphrodite's perfumed garden, and reached the stables where Helios's sun chariot rested. There, in a bronze brazier, burned the heavenly fire that lit the world each dawn. He carried a hollow fennel stalk, a plant whose dry pith could conceal an ember. With nimble fingers, he placed the end of the stalk into the brazier. The pith smoldered. He quickly concealed the glowing ember and tucked the stalk under his cloak. The heat warmed his ribs. He descended swiftly, glancing over his shoulder. Zeus slept, unaware. Prometheus reached the valleys where mortals lay shivering. He set down the fennel, blew gently, and coaxed a flame. Orange light burst forth. Humans flinched, then stretched their hands toward the warmth. They gathered wood and fed the blaze. They cooked meat for the first time, hardening their clay into pottery and forging simple tools. The theft of fire changed everything. It gave humans agency and drew Zeus's wrath anew. Prometheus did not stop at delivering fire. He taught humanity how to use it. He demonstrated placing logs in a pyramid and adding tinder. He showed them how to maintain coals through the night. He instructed them to bake clay in the flames to make pots for storing grain and water. He taught them to cook meat to make it tender and to roast roots to make them edible. With fire, humans could harden metal and shape bronze. They learned to fashion knives and sickles, to clear forests for fields, and to boil water for healing. He explained that fire could purify and destroy. It was to be revered and guarded. The first sparks of technology, Techne, emerged beside crackling logs. The smell of smoke became a symbol of community. People danced around the flames, telling simple stories with gestures. The night became less terrifying. Through these teachings, Prometheus empowered humans not only to survive but to improve their lives. In his heart, he felt pride and sorrow. He knew Zeus would discover the theft soon. He looked at the smiling faces lit by firelight and whispered, "It was worth it." When Zeus saw smoke rising from the mortal world again, his nostrils flared. Prometheus had defied him not once but twice. Fury coursed through him like lightning. Yet he knew that simply taking fire away again would not suffice. Men now knew its secrets and could make sparks. He needed a punishment that would cause ongoing suffering. Sitting on his throne, he brooded. Then inspiration, laced with cruelty, came. "I will send them a gift," he mused, "that will undo the blessing they cherish." He called his council and issued commands. He ordered Hephaestus to fashion a beautiful maiden from earth and water. He told Athena to teach this creation crafts, to make her industrious and pleasant. He directed Aphrodite to instill irresistible allure so that men would desire her. To Hermes, he assigned the task of placing cunning and deceit in her heart. "Each of you will give her something," Zeus said. Hence, she will be called Pandora, all gifted. The gods murmured. Some sensed the trap. Zeus smiled coldly. He envisioned men welcoming the maiden into their homes, unaware that she carried a vessel brimming with sorrows. His plan for Pandora began in malice and hypocrisy. Hephaestus retreated to his volcanic forge beneath the earth. He gathered clay of the purest hue and mixed it with sacred water. With strong hands and deft tools, he shaped the form of a maiden. He sculpted her head with delicate cheeks and a small chin. He curved her lips into a gentle smile. He carved her hair as flowing tresses, each strand detailed as if wind could stir it. He smoothed her limbs and gave her joints that allowed graceful movement. Around her wrists and ankles, he left room for bracelets. He adorned her with a golden diadem, etched with images of wild beasts and sea monsters. As he worked, he sighed, aware that he was crafting both a marvel and a curse. He placed the statue on a polished bench and called Athena to breathe life into it, much as she had done for the clay men. Hephaestus looked away, conflicted. He honored Zeus's command, but pitied the mortals who would suffer. His forge glowed, forging a paradox, a gift meant to harm. One by one, the gods approached the lifeless maiden to bestow their gifts. Athena draped her in a shimmering robe, woven of silver threads that caught every light. She taught her to spin and weave, to create fabrics that would warm bodies and adorn halls. The Graces placed necklaces and earrings of gold and lapis around her neck and ears, adornments crafted to delight the eye. Aphrodite touched her cheeks, imparting allure and an intoxicating scent. She gave her charm that could melt the hardest heart and awaken desire. Pytho, goddess of persuasion, whispered into her ear, giving her the power to coax and flatter. The Horae wove flowers into her hair, symbolic of the seasons that mortals would learn to count, a reminder that time would now govern human lives. Finally, Hermes, the trickster, approached. With a knowing smile, he touched her chest and her mind. He did not merely plant a whisper. He bestowed upon her a shameless mind and a deceitful nature. The poets would later call it the mind of a dog, kuneos nous. This shamelessness would urge her to act without modesty, while the deceit would give her a cunning tongue. Along with these, he endowed her with insatiable curiosity. Thus, the maiden received her last and most fateful gift. When the divine assembly stepped back, Pandora's chest rose. Her eyes opened. Her first gaze reflected nothing but innocence. The all-gifted had arrived, beautiful and perilous. Zeus announced to the gathered gods and to any mortal representatives present that this creation would be called Pandora, all-gifted, because each deity had contributed to her making. He then presented her at a divine assembly. She walked into the hall, her robe glittering, her movements graceful. Gods admired her craftsmanship, even if they knew her purpose. Mortal men stared in wonder. Zeus introduced her with honeyed words, masking his scheme. "Behold," he proclaimed, "a gift to ease your labors and share your homes." He handed her a sealed jar, heavy and beautifully painted. He announced that this jar contained blessings and instructed that it remain unopened. Pandora bowed politely. Prometheus, present at the edges of the assembly, tensed. He sensed danger. He remembered his warning to his brother Epimetheus. Never accept gifts from Zeus. Yet he remained silent, unwilling to incite immediate wrath. Zeus's gaze swept the hall, daring anyone to speak. Pandora smiled and looked at those around her with curiosity. The trap had been set. After the assembly, Prometheus sought out his brother Epimetheus, whose name meant afterthought. He grasped his arm and spoke urgently. "Do not accept any gift from Zeus," he said. "He intends harm. Remember the sacrifice at Mekone and the withdrawal of fire. His gifts carry poison." Epimetheus frowned, torn between gratitude and caution. "The maiden is beautiful," he replied. "Perhaps Zeus has repented." Prometheus shook his head. "Zeus's heart does not bend," he insisted. "If you take this Pandora, you invite misfortune. We have survived through cunning. Do not let desire undo us." Epimetheus hesitated, looking back toward where Pandora stood. Her eyes glittered with curiosity. Her presence awakened feelings he had not known. Prometheus squeezed his shoulder. "Trust me," he pleaded. "Refuse her." Then, fearing Zeus's ears, he withdrew. Epimetheus was left alone with a choice. His nature, impulsive and short-sighted, wrestled with his brother's prudent counsel. The scene ended with doubt lingering. The seeds of tragedy were sown by one brother's foresight and another's weakness. When Hermes arrived at Epimetheus's modest dwelling with Pandora, Epimetheus's resolve weakened. Pandora stepped inside, her presence filling the room with light and fragrance. She greeted Epimetheus warmly, her voice soft. Hermes placed the jar in a corner and reminded them of Zeus's instruction to keep it sealed. Then he departed with a sly smile. Epimetheus stared at Pandora, captivated. Her beauty, combined with the charm given by Aphrodite and the persuasion granted by Pytho, overwhelmed his caution. He remembered his brother's warning, but he also felt loneliness dissipate in her company. Against better judgment, he welcomed her as his companion. In doing so, he accepted the jar as well. He told himself he would not open it. Pandora, for her part, marveled at the world outside Olympus. She asked questions about everything: the feel of water, the taste of bread, the crackle of fire. Epimetheus answered patiently, his heart softening. The days that followed were peaceful, but underlying them was a sealed vessel brimming with destiny. The acceptance of Pandora was a choice driven by desire and forgetfulness that would ripple through all future generations. Epimetheus and Pandora settled into a semblance of domestic life. They baked bread, ground grain, and tended a small hearth. Pandora watched rain fall and marveled at flowers opening with the sun. She learned how to weave from the memory given to her by Athena. Epimetheus taught her to shape clay and listen to the river. He found joy in her curiosity and questions. In the corner of the house sat the jar, decorated with scenes of gods and beasts. Its lid was sealed with wax. Sometimes Pandora would glance at it while sweeping or stirring stew. She felt an itch inside her chest, an urge planted by Hermes' gift. She would ask Epimetheus about it. "It is sealed for our own good," he would reply. "We have everything we need." Pandora nodded, but the jar's presence grew heavier. Each quiet evening, as the fire crackled and stars wheeled overhead, curiosity coiled like a serpent. The domestic calm disguised a storm brewing inside Pandora's mind. The jar held more than objects. It held the tension between obedience and curiosity. Unbeknownst to Epimetheus and Pandora, the jar itself had been crafted with as much care as Pandora's body. Before presenting it, Zeus had commanded the potter god to shape a large pithos, a storage jar used by mortals to keep grain or oil. This one, however, was sealed and inscribed with warnings in the language of the gods. On its surface were painted scenes of plagues, sorrows, and strife swirling like a storm. Inside, Zeus had placed intangible forces: disease, old age, labor, hunger, madness, grief, deceit, and war. He sealed the lid with divine wax and gave it to Pandora as part of her dowry. He told her it contained gifts, but must remain shut. The jar symbolized trust and temptation. It was both a vessel of fate and a test of obedience. While Prometheus's gift of fire had empowered men, Zeus's gift contained the counterbalance, ills that would ensure mortals never became too content. The jar waited silently in Epimetheus's house, its contents yearning to burst free at the first sign of curiosity. As days turned into weeks, Pandora's attention returned again and again to the jar. The voice Hermes had implanted whispered, encouraging her to peek. "A small glimpse will not harm anyone," it cooed. Pandora would place her hand on the lid and feel a faint vibration, as if something inside stirred at her touch. She asked Epimetheus once more why it was forbidden. He became irritated. "Prometheus warned us. Do not tempt fate," he insisted. Pandora nodded outwardly, while inwardly the urge grew. She dreamed of the jar at night, of smoke swirling inside, of faces pressing against the clay, of voices calling her name. In waking moments, she busied herself with weaving and cooking, but she could not shake the jar from her mind. The gifts of the gods, curiosity, deceit, desire, waged war within her. She felt guilt, yet also a sense of destiny. She believed Zeus must have intended for it to be opened, or why else send it? The tension reached a breaking point. Curiosity, like a sprout pushing through soil, sought light. One afternoon, when Epimetheus was away gathering firewood, Pandora stood before the jar and made her decision. Hands trembling, she broke the wax seal with her fingernail. She lifted the lid slowly, expecting perhaps jewels or scents. Instead, a shriek filled the air. Dark shapes burst forth, swirling like smoke. They shrieked and laughed as they escaped. They were not physical creatures, but personified forces. Pestilence rubbed its hands and flew toward villages. Old age groaned and settled on shoulders. Toil carried a hammer and nails. Famine stretched its skeletal fingers. Madness cackled. Grief wept and flung tears. Deceit hissed. Strife brandished knives. Hundreds of other woes streamed out. They scattered across the world, sinking into houses, fields, and hearts. Pandora screamed and tried to catch them, but her hands passed through. Her hair flew about her face. She slammed the lid down, panting. For a heartbeat, all was silent. The jar trembled. Pandora stared at her hands, horrified by what she had done. Outside, the first screams of afflicted mortals rose. The world changed in an instant, and innocence shattered. When Pandora closed the lid, a soft voice cried from within, "Let me out!" It was Elpis, Hope, the last of the jar's contents. Hope fluttered like a tiny light inside the darkness. Pandora hesitated, hand on the lid. Should she open it again? She feared releasing another curse, yet she sensed that Hope was different. She kept the jar shut. Thus Hope remained, either preserved as a consolation for humanity or trapped beyond reach. Philosophers would later debate whether Pandora's act saved hope for mankind or deprived them of immediate solace. For now, hope lingered in the jar, a whispering presence that could not escape. Outside, men and women labored under new burdens, but somewhere in their hearts a faint resilience flickered. They believed that dawn would follow night, that fields would yield after famine, that children would laugh despite sorrow. Perhaps the whisper of hope reached them through the clay. Perhaps it remained hidden, waiting to be found in rituals and stories. The jar, sealed once more, sat quietly, containing the one force Zeus may not have intended to include. The escape of the ills transformed human existence. Disease visited huts without warning, draining strength and dimming eyes. Aging bent spines and wrinkled skin. Toil made hands calloused and shoulders ache. Hunger gnawed at bellies when crops failed. Madness whispered in ears, leading to irrational acts. Deceit crept into markets and marriages. War erupted as strife sowed discord. Grief became familiar, visiting parents and lovers. With these burdens came new behaviors. People learned to bury their dead, to care for the sick, to comfort the grieving. They discovered resilience. They gathered around fires to share sorrows and to find meaning. They looked skyward and asked why, inventing myths to explain their fate. Hope, hidden in the jar, manifested as determination. Even while plowing rocky soil or mending torn nets, they believed in better harvests and safe returns. Mortality acquired depth. Life was now a mixture of suffering and joy. This mixture gave rise to prayers and poetry, to community and memory. The weight of the ills shaped what it meant to be human. While mortals struggled under their new burdens, Zeus turned his gaze toward the source of his humiliation. He could not tolerate Prometheus's defiance. He called an assembly of gods and pronounced judgment. "Prometheus has stolen fire and tricked me twice," he thundered. "For his compassion toward mortals he shall suffer." He commanded Hephaestus to forge unbreakable chains and ordered Hermes to escort the Titan to a remote mountain. "Let him be bound where he can watch the world he loves," Zeus decreed. "Let his punishment endure until I decide otherwise." The gods murmured. Some felt unease at the severity, but none dared oppose Zeus. Prometheus accepted his fate with stoic silence. He did not beg for mercy. He looked at the humans who now tended fires and bandaged wounds and smiled faintly. He knew the cost of his rebellion would be great. Yet he believed his suffering would be less than the world's suffering without fire. His judgment marked the beginning of a torture that would last generations and echo through myth. Kratos and Bia, power and force, children of Pallas and Styx, accompanied Hermes and Hephaestus as enforcers of Zeus's decree. They dragged Prometheus up the jagged slopes of the Caucasus, a range at the edge of the world. The cliff above the roaring sea was bleak and windswept. Hephaestus lagged behind, his hammer heavy in his hand. "Forgive me, kinsman," he whispered. Kratos sneered. "Why do you delay? Do you pity the enemy of Zeus? Act now, or you will need pity yourself." "Pin him to the rock." Bia shoved Prometheus against the stone. "Your love for humanity ends here, Titan," she hissed. "You will learn what it means to defy the king." Prometheus met her gaze without flinching. Hephaestus, torn between obedience and kinship, reluctantly wrapped the Titan's wrists and ankles with chains forged of adamant. He looked up once more. "This is a terrible work," he murmured. Kratos retorted, "Your kinship ends where the will of Zeus begins. To your task." With trembling hands, Hephaestus bolted the chains to the rock and drove an iron spike through Prometheus's chest, pinning him in place. Hermes, usually loquacious, turned away, unable to meet his cousin's eyes. The wind howled, rain lashed Prometheus's face. He felt the iron bite and the stone's coldness. Yet he lifted his chin. He looked out at the distant horizon, where humans lit fires and smoke curled upward. He drew strength from that sight. Kratos and Bia stepped back, satisfied. Hephaestus wiped his brow, tears in his eyes, and left. Prometheus remained alone, bound between sky and earth, subject to the elements. His punishment had begun. He would not die, but he would suffer. Above him, the gods watched. Below, the sea crashed relentlessly. No sooner had the chains cooled than Zeus sent a monstrous eagle to torment Prometheus. Its wings spanned the sky, its talons sharp. It descended upon the bound Titan and dug its beak into his side. It ripped at his liver and devoured it, piece by piece. Prometheus gritted his teeth, refusing to scream. Blood darkened the rock. The eagle's eyes were unfeeling, its hunger insatiable. At nightfall, it flew away, leaving Prometheus weak and bleeding. Because he was immortal, his liver regenerated during the night, only to be torn again at dawn. Day after day, the cycle continued. Pain became his constant companion. He counted sunrises by the beating of wings. He endured because he held a secret. He knew the prophecy that a son of Zeus would one day overthrow his father, and he refused to reveal it. He believed this knowledge granted him power even in chains. His torment was not meaningless. It was testimony to his defiance and compassion. Word of Prometheus's torment spread through Olympus. Some gods felt a twinge of pity. Thetis, a sea nymph, sighed as she rocked on the waves. Demeter looked away, remembering her own grief when Persephone would later disappear. Athena, who had given humans life, felt conflicted but respected Zeus's judgment. Hermes occasionally visited the bound Titan with a cup of nectar. "Why endure this?" he asked. "Because I could not watch them freeze," Prometheus replied. Hermes carried the answer back to Olympus. Zeus did not soften. He believed the punishment served as a warning. Hera remained silent, focusing on her own future concerns. Apollo composed a song about foresight and folly, while Dionysus, not yet fully recognized, laughed darkly at the irony. Hestia stoked the hearth on Olympus, aware that fire on earth existed because of Prometheus. The gods' mixed reactions reflected the complexities of divine relationships. Compassion was tempered by fear of challenging Zeus. The punishment persisted, a spectacle of power and a lesson about defiance. Back in their humble home, Epimetheus and Pandora faced the consequences of curiosity. Epimetheus sat by the fire, head in hands, guilt pressing upon him. "I should have listened," he murmured. He remembered Prometheus's warning and his own weakness. He looked at Pandora, who wept softly. "I could not resist," she whispered. "Something within me urged me to look." They held each other, feeling shame and sorrow. Outside, neighbors coughed and moaned. Ills had taken root. Epimetheus considered opening the jar again to release hope, but fear of unleashing further curses restrained him. He kept the lid sealed. Their remorse did not undo what was done. Instead, it became a lesson to tell their children that gifts from the gods come with strings, that caution and foresight matter, and that errors cannot be undone. The couple lived with their mistake, and their story entered mortal lore as a warning about temptation and trust. Gaia felt every new grief and joy that humans experienced. She sensed their plows breaking her soil, their tears soaking into her earth, their laughter echoing through her forests. She mourned for the suffering unleashed by Pandora, yet she observed resilience. Humans planted crops even after drought, rebuilt homes after floods, and sang songs amid toil. They developed rituals to honor earth, pouring libations and scattering barley. They erected stone altars on hillsides and offered ox bones wrapped in fat, recalling the sacrifice at Mekone. They learned to cooperate, to share labor, to comfort the sick. Gaia whispered to mountains, "This is the price of knowledge and freedom." She took solace in the fact that hope lingered. She vowed to nurture life, sending rain to parched fields and coaxing seeds to sprout. Yet beneath her fertile surface, another emotion stirred. Gaia had once aided Zeus in overthrowing Cronus, but now she felt the scars of that alliance. It was her own rock that pinned Prometheus, her soil that swallowed Titans. She remembered Uranus's blood on her shore and the screams of her children. Anger coiled around her core like a serpent. "The earth is patient," she told herself. "Seeds grow unseen. One day she would bring forth a force to challenge the sky." Until then, she nurtured rebellion in roots and whispers, a primeval fire buried deep. She could not openly defy Zeus's decrees, but she could sustain those who suffered and prepare for a reckoning. The human response to adversity revealed a new strength. Their prayers reached the heavens, and their hands built civilization. Gaia's perspective encompassed sorrow, pride, foresight, and a simmering resolve. From his throne atop Olympus, Zeus watched the unfolding drama. Smoke from sacrifices spiraled upward. He heard prayers asking for relief from disease and famine. Part of him felt satisfaction. Mortals now respected the gods. Yet unease gnawed at him. He remembered the prophecy that a child of his would one day overthrow him, just as he had overthrown Cronus. Prometheus, bound on the Caucasus, knew this secret and refused to share it. Zeus considered his next steps. He contemplated marriage to Hera, a union that would solidify his rule but also introduce jealousy and conflict. Metis had counseled him that children might bring danger. He weighed the costs of vengeance against the need for allies. He thought of Pandora, the Kalon Kakon, the beautiful evil he had unleashed upon men. She was a trap, disguised as a gift, a creature crafted by gods to bring toil and sorrow to a previously carefree race. In his mind, Zeus felt both pride at his cunning and the weight of the trap he had devised wrapped in divine beauty. He intended that men would love and suffer for her, embracing their own destruction for the sake of a wife. In quiet moments, he looked toward the empty throne draped with vines, a seat reserved for a future deity. He realized that control could never be absolute. Each act of punishment produced new complications. His reflection showed that even a king of gods must reckon with destiny and the consequences of his own wrath. Plans began to form for the next phase of his reign. Despite the spread of ills, humans found ways to endure. At night, they gathered around fires, gift of Prometheus, and told stories. They spoke of how they were fashioned from clay and divine breath, of how a titan tricked a god at Mekone, of how fire was stolen in a fennel stalk. They recounted Pandora's tale and warned their children about curiosity. Through storytelling, they forged culture. They invented words, named stars, and composed songs. They established laws to regulate behavior and rituals to appease deities. They celebrated births and mourned deaths. At every altar, they followed the pattern set at Mekone. Gods received white bones wrapped in glistening fat burned upon a sacred hearth so that smoke might reach Olympus, while mortals kept the edible meat for themselves. This ritual, tribute and defiance intertwined, came from Prometheus's cunning and became the eternal model of Greek sacrifice. Hope, though sealed in a jar, manifested as resilience and imagination. It allowed them to dream of abundant harvests and peaceful seasons. They looked at the night sky and found constellations, embedding their myths in the heavens. In these gatherings, the community strengthened. Humans learned that together they could face disease, old age, and toil. The flame at the center of their circle reminded them of Prometheus's sacrifice. Hope was not an abstract concept. It was lived daily in acts of care and creativity. Chained to the mountain, with an eagle tearing at his liver, Prometheus maintained a spark of defiance. Between bouts of agony, he whispered to the wind, "I do not regret my gift." He remembered the look on humans' faces when fire warmed them and the knowledge that hope remained. Hermes visited occasionally, asking if he would reveal Zeus's fate to win freedom. Prometheus smiled through his pain. "I know which son will depose him," he said quietly, "but I will not tell. My silence is my last power." He bore his torment not only for mortals, but as a statement that even gods could not break all wills. He looked forward to the day when a hero, Heracles, would release him, though that day lay far in the future. For now, he endured. His chains clanked in the wind, a music of resistance. His story would inspire poets and philosophers to ponder justice, rebellion, and foresight. Prometheus became a symbol of creative defiance, a reminder that compassion can defy tyranny, and that knowledge carries both price and promise. The myth of Prometheus and Pandora reveals that creation, compassion, and curiosity carry heavy costs. Prometheus's decision to mold men from clay and steal fire granted humanity warmth, technology, and the power to cook and forge. Yet his defiance provoked Zeus, leading to his eternal torment on the Caucasus. Pandora, fashioned as a beautiful gift, embodied both grace and deceit. Her curiosity unleashed plague, toil, and grief into the world. Zeus's punishments reflected his strategy to impose limits on mortal ambition, veiled in divine gifts. Only hope remained, hidden yet persistent. Through suffering, humans learned resilience and created culture. They honored gods with burnt bones, tended fires, and told stories to explain their fate. The episode ends with unresolved tension. Prometheus remains bound, mortals struggle under new burdens, and Zeus contemplates future actions, including his marriage to Hera. Hope flickers in hearths and hearts, sustaining life through adversity. The next episode will explore the divine union of Zeus and Hera, where jealousy and power will test the new order. Until then, the cost of defiance and the seed of hope continue to shape the mortal and immortal worlds. Subscribe for more epic journeys. Visit myth2myth.com and discover all our products.